Household Vulnerability Index is a homegrown index. It was developed by FANRPAN. This was after we realized that the issue of targeting is a challenge. We have development practitioners who are giving food aid, some are giving tools for agriculture, and others are giving knowledge. But we have never known how best to match the needs of a household to the support that is to be provided.
FANRPAN's earlier work in 2004 focused on studying the impact of HIV/AIDS on agriculture and food security, and major findings were that it increased household vulnerability in two main ways. Households' capacity to recover from shock, and this again causes failure to cope with external shocks. Taking into consideration that 70% of the people live in rural households in sub-Saharan Africa, relying on rain-fed agriculture for livelihood, chronic food insecurity is a common feature amongst them when drought strikes. The need to conduct a study to establish a widely accepted approach to measuring vulnerability saw the development of the HVI tool, the Household Vulnerability Index, in partnership with the Southern Africa Trust and World Vision International. The study was carried out by local people who were trained for this venture. This made it possible for accurate information.
We then, after developing the index as a statistical tool, looked for a partner where we could go in, document the assets in a household, analyze the level of vulnerability, and then work with a partner who would then be able to provide interventions for poverty alleviation. We partnered with World Vision International. The beauty with World Vision is that when they go into a community, they invest for 15 years. They work through what they call area development programs, where within a country they will identify a district of about 4,000 households, and they will map out the interventions that are required to safeguard the children and the livelihoods of that community. So we are happy because through this partnership, we've been able to develop databases for Zimbabwe, Lesotho, and Swaziland. And in these three countries, we now have data over a 5-year period where we are tracking the asset base in specified households. We've categorized these households. Now World Vision is now best placed to say, how do we intervene?
The greatest investment is required for the 3.4% of the households in the high vulnerability category. Most of the times, these households are either female or child-headed. They live in chronic poverty and require specifically packaged and targeted social protection interventions to get them out of this situation. In order to survive, they have sold off all their assets to stay alive and have little capacity for farming.
Nanyaka-ke kube kubi ngoba sitena siqala kusika tshani basobuyashara utshani kungakho nje ngihleti kuloko ngidamala ukuphila ukuthi ngize ngikhone ukuthole ukuphila abantwana bangu-5 enginabo kuleli khaya but nje kuphila nsokolo vele ngenzabe kudla.
Those that are at high vulnerability status are households that are hit hardest by the drought situation. They are relying solely on World Food Program for food. The household doesn't have even a member that is working. Parents are both unemployed. It's just the NGOs like World Vision that is supporting that household with school fees because the parents are not working.
Examples of interventions they require are food assistance to stabilize their food and nutrition security, cash transfers for the households to meet their non-food requirements like health and education costs, and asset transfer or input subsidies to help them begin to rebuild and secure their livelihoods. This will prevent them from resorting to negative coping strategies to address their vulnerability.
The challenge we've always had is when our communities see the development practitioners come in and their track is written, dams for all. We put them under a tree and say, what help do you need? They always say a dam. The following day, another truck comes in and says, food for the hungry. We say, how can we help you? We need food. Then when we want to decide who should get the food, we go up to the village chief and say, who are the most vulnerable? Of course, in most cases, it could be the chief's wives who get priority. It could be those who've had recent deaths. But what you're not seeing is that if in a household with 4 or 5 orphans, may be better off because they are getting remittances from town. So you need to have a score that tells you the level of vulnerability. You have to document that so that you are not using subjective means, you are using scientific evidence to match your interventions.
The majority of households, 93%, are in the moderate vulnerability category of the index. Though they have assets like brick houses, electricity, household appliances and running water, they face transitory or temporary vulnerability, which makes them slide in and out of chronic situations whenever they're exposed to shocks that impact on their livelihoods. These are droughts, spikes in market prices of food and farming inputs. In the short term, they require social safety nets to strengthen their resilience to these shocks.
Lilitulu nalo liyakwenda nako lokuthi lisintshintshele ngoba uyalima ukhane ukuthi selithi sewuyabhaceka lo mbili bese uyawushaya ulanga uphinde ubuyele phansi kanti noma ngabe ulime ngalesikhathi ukhane sisowucinzetelwa ngilelanga noma ngabe uyitholele imali ukhane sowucinzetelwa ngilelanga kakhulu.
Members of these households still have a positive mindset and with the right assistance will become self-reliant. Because they have tools to be productive in their endeavors by receiving seed, fertilizer and knowledge of good farming practices, they will be good role players in their community.
In most cases, the moderate can cope. What they need is assistance in terms of knowledge, assistance in terms of inputs, good seed, and fertilizer so that we can boost their yields. If we can boost and sustain their yields, we'll lift them out of moderate, and with the extra income they will get from the excess yield, they can start buying assets, replenishing their assets so they can move to the lowly vulnerable.
These households are in a vulnerable situation but are still able to cope without external assistance. In most cases, they have an income not related to agriculture and still have their assets and tools to farm. These households still have 2 parents and have an outside income, such as from teaching. The head of the household could recently have retired and now has retirement money to buy farming implements like a tractor or plow, goats, cattle or poultry. He can afford labor and therefore utilizes all his fields. This category will perform better when they receive knowledge in terms of right farming practices and financial management.
Ngacishe ngithi ke mangifika la ekhaya sengibuka ke lo sefuna indlela ke okay indlela yokuthi ngingenda njani ke nyalo sengisekhaya ngikhonile ke lokuthi ngibe nawo lama project la fire ekhathi kona lo ngikhuluma ngabo labo logwaja ukhona ke manje bekhona ngintenda ke ekhaya ngale mali yabo nekuthi ke ngibe nelwazi ukuthi imali mase ngiyithole ngiyisebenzisa kanjani ke sikhona ukuphila la ekhaya.
Diversified farming is another way to keep a household running. A variety of crops will contribute to a healthy diet. This will also ensure that all the eggs are not in the same basket, so to speak.
Kukhona inhlangano lengisitile kule hip garden yaka IRD. So beta ke basifundisa ngilabanye labafundisa ngale kulima ngekonke. So base basikene hip garden ingasisethi. Yona ke ingisita la ekutheni ngiyakhona kulima itamatisi. Ngilime na anyanisi. Ngothi mangabe ngifuna kupheka ungahlushekwa la ekhaya vele kuconze lapha kule hip garden kuthathu lokho sekuvuthe kufakwe ti.
HVI has really assisted us as an ADP to plan and target the right people, to prioritize our interventions, and also to target the right people with the right supports that they need. We so much appreciate that the work that FANRPAN and the University of Venda have done to come up with these projects. And we are recommending that each ADP should conduct this exercise because it is very useful to have accurate data which will enable you to target properly and also come up with interventions that will directly affect the people that you are working with.
The Household Vulnerability Index is an indispensable tool to help understand livelihood strategies and coping mechanisms in a household. It helps development practitioners to improve targeting and match household needs to appropriate development interventions. By understanding livelihood strategies and mapping household and community assets, development practitioners are able to benchmark and measure development progress.
For FANRPAN, this is the best in the sense that we've been able, number one, to bring in multi-sectoral actors to engage with the food security agenda. Who are these actors? We've brought in researchers from the universities. We've brought in an NGO, which is living with the community. We've brought in the youth who are collecting the data, and we've brought in the farmers to understand that being honest about your situation will help lift you out of poverty. But being on the queue for food aid will keep you as a welfare case. Secondly, we've been able to develop knowledge. This knowledge can now improve the policy development process. So we've developed a database that should now be used to generate evidence to inform policy making. And this is the thrust of FANRPAN, evidence-based policies for a food-secure Africa.